Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm going to lecture on banking and introduce to you the Austrian theory of the business cycle. This is one of the most important and significant contributions of the Austrian school. It was developed, the business cycle theory, the boom-bust cycle theory, which was mainly developed by Mises and Hayek. And yes, we'll be going into it. So yeah, that's the outline of this lecture. So what is banking? Banking is the intermediary between savers and borrowers, and it facilitates capital allocation. Um, it's okay. Um, Yeah, so there have been historically different banks. Banking has been a fundamental institution to advance economies where people began to have accumulated wealth. You need a place to store it, so you would put it into a money warehouse or a bank. But there are a couple different types of banks. We have deposit banking and we have loan banking. So deposit banking is like a deposit, a money warehouse where we can safe keep the money. You have custodians or guards looking after it. It has the asset of a cash reserve and the liability of a depositor claim. And this is more to do with, I guess, finance and accounting, but very significant for our analysis of banking is a balance sheet, where on the left you have assets, and then on the right you have equities and liabilities, if I have that correct. And the assets always have to equal the equity and liabilities. Um, but I really want to simplify this because it seems like a lot of Austrian economists go very much into the details of accounting and balance sheets, but I don't think it's that complicated or needs to be. Maybe if you want to make it more technical and complicated, take a class on accounting, but this is not what that is. Um, so we have loan banking. Loan banking is a bank lends out investor funds and it channels savings into investment. Uh, so with loan banking, this is where we have the existence of usury or interest rates. It's set by the market, meaning that what the interest someone will agree to and pay for a certain loan depend on the time preference of the creditor, the person who is giving out the loan. If they have a higher time preference, they want to get paid sooner, then they will have a higher interest rate. But if they have a lower time preference, meaning over a longer period of time, you can pay me back, then the interest rate will tend to be lower. So interest rates are derived from the market or people's time preference. And this is very important to understand. Moreover, the type of contract and the nature of your savings in a bank is dependent on the type of uh, the way you save it, the contract that you have with the bank. Is my savings going to be in a deposit? I guess maybe that would be a savings account. Or is it going to be my savings used as loans for other people? In which case, um, I don't have immediate redemption when I want to of my savings. I have to also agree to this contract in the time period, specifying when I'm able to re-accumulate my savings. And there's this debate. Jesus Fuerte de Soto's book, which is more intermediate on money, banking, and economic cycles, discusses the historical debates of who is the property owner of savings in a bank. does the bank own that property of your savings, or are you the owner of that property? So it's very interesting. But yeah, we can potentially discuss that in the discussion. But then what happens? What happens with the state is they get involved. And what do they produce? They produce what's called fractional reserve banking, which is the combination of deposit and loan banking. So deposit banking uh, is not inherently inflationary, or excuse me, loan banking. I mean, both of them technically. They're not inherently inflationary. So what happens when you combine the two? Well, you get something called fractional reserve banking, which becomes the technical process by which banks and having a central bank inflates, produces inflation, creates more money. And how do they do this? Well, I'll get to that, but I'll just mention these points that fractional reserve banking is a combination of deposit and loan banking. Um, and this is a graph. Basically, assets equal liabilities. It's a bank balance sheet, but that's not important. Um, Essentially, what happens is that with fractional reserve banking, a fraction, that's why it's called fractional, a fraction of the money in the bank is saved as deposits, and another fraction is loaned out. So this is why it's a combination of both deposit and loans. And what happens with the loans is they go to people in the market, debtors. People take the loans and then they invest it, they buy things, but they redeposit this money they've accumulated back into more banks. And now these banks, who are also engaging in fractional reserve banking, deposit a fraction of it and loan out another fraction. So this is what's called the money multiplier. That if the reserve ratio for these banks is at 10%, you only need to hold 10% in deposits of savings, but you can loan out 90%. Now 90%, let's say of $100,000 is loaned out. So it's $90,000 loaned out into the market. Another person gets that $90,000, or multiple people. They deposit this $90,000 into another bank. What's 10% of $90,000? Or what's 90%? Yes. My As being an Austrian economist, uh, I'll confess that I feel like my mathematical skills have deteriorated slightly, marginally, fractionally. Um, but basically, this $90,000 that was loaned out is also deposited in the banks. The reserve ratio is still 10%. So 10% of $90,000, $9,000, stays in the bank. $81,000 is now loaned out again. So now you continue this process exponentially. The money supply has now multiplied exponentially. But this is not real money. What this is called fiduciary media. But this is an example of fiduciary media. Money substitutes not fully backed by commodity money. So the bank holds $100 of gold, but issues $300 in deposits. $200 is fiduciary media. It exists only on paper and not as reserves. So all this money that's been created, the amount of goods and services, or the commodity, the gold and silver that existed in the banks has not increased at all. All that's increased is the claims, the money substitutes, the IOUs, the pieces of paper that say you are entitled to this amount of gold in the bank. That's been increased. So there's more claims to the same amount of number of goods that exist that's being saved. This is the phenomenon of fractional reserve banking. And we'll get into the effects in a second, but the critique of fiduciary media is that it creates artificial money supply growth. The base money becomes fractional reserves, which becomes fiduciary media. And this creates a circulation of credit and unsustainable booms. Uh, it's fraudulent. Um, so, so, so continuing our analysis, what happens with this money is that it is circulated in the economy as credit, and it's loaned out. Um, People taking on this debt, and what do those people do? Well, they invest it. So the production structure of an economy, the lines of production people get into, um, is it going? Did we stop it? Okay, good. Um, this creates a well, primarily it distorts time preference. Because it distorts interest rates. So what happens? Yes. Oh no, it's okay. Okay. Uh, okay. First, what happens when this new money is created is that because of this new supply of money that exists, interest rates can become lower. It's a signal that there's more money in savings in the banks that are available for use for production than what actually exists. So instead of interest rates being based on time preferences and real savings in an economy, it's artificial money that's applying a downward pressure on interest rates, which signals to debtors and investors that there's more money available for lines of production than what actually exists. And it's in one hand theoretical, and on the other hand, we'll have examples of how it manifests in the economy in reality. But um, this is what high time preference is, or artificially lowered time preference. Um, this is where it comes from. Um, but okay, that's more a matter of time preference, which we can discuss. But let's go into the fact that this money, due to lower interest rates, goes into more investments, more creditors take this money. They make lines of production, structures of production that are unsustainable. So this cycle, the Austrian business cycle theory, is the idea that this artificial expansion of the money supply leads to a boom. It leads to a boom in production, the artificial good times. It's like consuming drugs. You feel good in the moment. That's why drugs are consumed and effective, because they make you feel good. But this is unsustainable. This is not reality. And we're not living in a world of what is ideal. Ideally, I'd like to not have effects and consequences, and I'd like to ideally feel good. But the truth is that there is a status that is being perpetuated by something that's artificial and fake. This is the drugs. This is the boom. So people go into these lines of production thinking that these are good times. We have the savings. And the bust occurs when this sustained credit is no longer sustained. The hens have to come to roost. Is that the saying? Uh, um, this is the recession. This is the crash, the Great Depression, the recession that follows the boom. Where did it come from? It came from this artificial boom. So this is the sobering process. You do drugs one night and you have to pay with the hangover the next night. But this is the thing, is that the hangover is actually the cure. It's the cleansing process of the distortions that have been perpetuated in the market economy. Um, and how does this also result? It results in inflation. All this new money, uh, Mises says that in regards to inflation, the question is how do people now have the ability to charge higher prices for goods and services? It comes from an increase in the quantity supplied of money. And Rothbard says that the evil of an inflationary society is not that there's higher prices. The evil is the counterfeiting of creating more money in the first place. So this is done by the central banks. In the United States, it's called the Federal Reserve. They're the banker's bank. In their process of buying back bonds from other banks, they issue out these Federal Reserve deposits. And they also are the quote unquote safeguard from wildcat banking. This regulatory system of banking is what keeps a cartel of banking. In free banking, this idea of markets for banking, if I can open a bank, you can open a bank, you can open a bank. We keep each other in check via the market process of profits and losses. That well, we may not engage in fractional reserve banking, or we'll tend to keep our reserves higher, close to 100, because if I begin to fractionally reserve, I can make profits. Absolutely. Me and my friends, we can issue more loans, make more money, but now everyone has a claim to my deposits of gold, in a sense. So you can come ask for the gold. If I don't have the gold to pay you all back, I go out of business. I go bankrupt. So that way I keep the check on all of us as institutions of banks. But what happened is that the central bank and their regulatory state basically can determine who can enter the market of banking. So when they put all these regulations up, uh, banks have the freedom to engage in fractional reserve banking because it's too big to fail. These banks are too important to be not regulated, to be free from bank runs. So this moral hazard leads the banks, to making more loans. And it's not even that the loans are necessarily bad. It's just that they're unsustainable. It's not necessarily incompetence. It's that there is uh, insufficient savings in a real economy to support these. So what happens is these businesses that are created, maybe they are a good idea, but they become zombie companies. They're businesses, complexes that can only exist due to unsustainable credit, due to the loans, the lines of credit, the debts they take from the banks, which can only perpetuate this due to a central bank issuing these faulty reserves, uh, signals that we do have these savings to keep you afloat. But that's the problem, is that you multiply this to many companies, many industries, and when you can't sustain the credit because it does lead to inflation any longer, they have to bust. The bubble has to bust. So this is, in a sense, the theoretical system of fractional reserve banking and why it leads to inflation and recessions. Uh, so yes, inflation again is an expansion of the money supply, primarily via money substitutes and fiduciary media. Fiat money is this idea of money by force, not money by the market, this praxeological evolution that is so elegant and beautiful, but political money backed by legal tender laws saying that you have to accept this piece of paper. What the government says is money. So we don't have a free market for money. If we can repeal legal tender laws, I think that would significantly not only constrain governments from printing money and distorting the structures of production in society, but allow people to actually save, allow people to actually have lower time preferences. And I'll get into more about time preferences and societal structures in a bit. But yeah, again, inflation a lot of people think it means rising prices. And this is why it's important to understand inflation is a increase in the quantity supplied of money. That's the cause. The effect tends to be a rise in prices, and not uniformly. This is the Cantillon effect that Professor Thornton mentioned yesterday. That money is not helicoptered across the economy to people and distributed equally. As much as the government would like you to think it is, that's not true. That's why they want to deceive you. They want to bribe you by saying, we'll give you money, we'll give you free stuff. What actually happens is the money is created by the central banks and goes to the banks. So the first receivers of the banks are the banks and the friends of the banks, the government, bureaucrats, the DC super zips, New York Stock Exchange, central bankers, military industrial complex connected people. When they receive this new money, they're able to buy goods, invest in projects, accumulate capital. And as the money then is exchanged and processed through the economy, the later receivers, the people who receive the money later, are people who don't have these politically or financially connected jobs. So what happens is now they go into the market, the store, to purchase the same goods, but the people who received the money first were able to purchase the goods at a certain price. Then they bought more due to marginal value and whatnot. So now the signal to the producers of certain goods is that, wow, there's an increase in demand. Let's raise the prices. Prices go up. The later receivers of the money go to the market. Prices have adjusted. Prices are always adjusting. There's no equilibrium. Prices are dynamic. They go into the market, pay for goods. Prices have adjusted, but they've gone up. Now you're going to buy the same goods and services you bought the day before, but if prices adjusted, you have to pay more money for the same amount of goods and services. And this is what Keynes, a non-Marxist socialist, discovered with the idea of how do we bypass minimum wages while maintaining inflation. He said there's a difference between nominal wages and real wages. The nominal wage is the numerical wage you're paid for a job. Let's say it's $20 an hour. The real wage is what $20 actually buys you. 20x, 20 times the amount of hours you work. So let's say you have a $10,000, $1,000. What that can buy you, that's your real wage. So at one point, maybe it was, a home, a car, certain groceries, steaks, wine. In the Bible, not that I read it, but I heard this, Cantillon mentioned the Bible, saying that in the people who receive this money first will have more wine, more wheat, or more meat on their table. The people who are the later receivers, the less fortunate people, they don't have as much. So in this system, this Keynesian system, with more government spending via this process of fractional reserve banking and multiplying the money supply, as the amount of money is increasing, real wages do not increase at the same rate as nominal wages increase. What this means is that even though we can continuously pursue higher minimum wages, it doesn't matter as long as real wages do not meet the living standard we previously had. If money increased 10x, 100x, million x, that means the value of money decreases so much, your purchasing power decreases so much that it doesn't matter if you increase the wage to 100 or 1,000. If it doesn't meet what you can really buy with the amount of money in an economy, then this is how you bypass real wages. And this is what real wealth distribution is in an economy due to what's considered the financialization of the economy. this idea that the more government spends, the less people and the citizenry are able to spend. So the government, in essence, is like a child that is on an allowance. I don't have children, but I was a child on an allowance. I mean, okay, but the point being that instead of the government having to ask the parents for an allowance, the government created a system to create their own money. So this is what the counterfeiting system is. This is what central banks do. They counterfeit the money. That's why the most severe punishments, the most severe crimes you can commit are tax evasion and counterfeiting money, because it directly conflicts and competes with what the government's business is, which is counterfeit and stealing people's money. Was a joke by Rothbard. But the point being that if you could also have the power to print and create money, then you can do what you want. And that's what the government, the whole process of modern government monetary systems and financing is to bypass taxing people, because you feel the pain of taxing. If you had to pay for wars directly, you wouldn't want to support them. But if we can print the money, go to war, then we just need your your national support. We don't need your money. We already took it from you. That's why printing money is a stealth tax, an indirect tax, a hidden tax. You don't see it, but it affects your real wages. So we can pump your nominal wage up, and we can say we're doing tax cuts, but if we keep printing money, then we bypass both your support and your refrainment from supporting what we want. So this is how the government finances itself, really. But let's continue. Yes, it's important to remember in studying economics that printing money creates no societal benefits. It is only benefiting a few special privileged people: the bankers, central bankers, friends of the banks, governments. Okay. So Mises, he said fractional reserve banking distorts price signals. The circulation of credit is destabilizing for an economy, a society. Money is what brings us together. If you distort money, if you destroy money, what are you destroying? You're destroying the essence, the nervous system of society, which is the economy, economics. Hayek developed this idea of business cycles. He says credit expansion lowers interest rates artificially. This leads to a misallocation of resources, malinvestments. We think we have more savings than what we otherwise do. Mises has the example of building a house with bricks. We create a plan of how we're going to construct this house with the certain number of bricks that we have available. But what if we think we have more bricks than we actually do? Then we create a different plan. We create a different house, and somewhere in that process of our line of production, we run out of bricks. Now we don't have a house, and we don't have bricks. We wasted these resources. This is the misallocation of capital. So the crisis emerges when the credit contracts. We're told we're going to get more bricks, more bricks, more bricks. The bricks never come. So we continue to build this brick house McMansion, and we don't have the bricks. Off this point, and I'll mention now some of the existing economic production structures that have been distorted that you can see for yourself. And it's called designer chic. And there's a whole history of architecture that came from the Bauhaus movement, the brutalist movement, this idea that we shouldn't build cathedrals and elegant buildings of feats of architecture because, one, it takes too long, but two, we need something that's bombable, that's replaceable. Because if we live in a war society, then why have art when we could build things quickly and cheaply? So you see already that this is the spiritual effect of society, of civilization, on architecture, on art. And this also goes hand in hand with the higher time preference. If we're creating so much money, that we need things to be produced for profits sooner than later, then why would you spend time on art? Just put it up. Go look at so many fast food restaurants, if you will. Shoebox style architecture, gunmetal gray or light tan. No character, soulless. This is the spiritual production of fiat, fiat money. So I find that interesting. Rothbard's view: fractional reserve banking is fraud. Uh, it's two claims on one asset. As we mentioned, if there's more promissory notes for the same amount of goods, if we both get a promise to redeem for the same good, something went wrong. This is why it's double entry bookkeeping and is an issue. So we can't all redeem. They block us from being able to redeem it. They close the banks. That's why Rothbard advocated 100% reserve banking. Money in banking, again, is very popular with the Austrians. So I won't go too deep into the debates of, whether we should have 100% reserve banking, but that exists. There's Austrians who debate, should we have some fractional reserve banking or 100% reserve banking? So yeah, interest and time preference. Interest, again, emerges from time preference, not money. Credit expansion lowers interest artificially. This is the seeds of the business cycle. Circulation of credit expansion, malinvestment in capital structure, crisis and recession as inevitable. And it leads to the boom bust cycle, as we mentioned. The bust is the liquidation and correction process, the sobering up process, the necessary correction of available resources to the existing amount of money. Some historical examples. This isn't all theory. This is what is actually has occurred throughout history, and this is why history is important to apply, the flesh and meat, if you will, to the bones that is economic theory. But there's some historical examples from earlier times, but more recently, 1923, Weimar Republic, German hyperinflation, America's Great Depression. Murray Rothbard wrote a book on it. It's pretty good. How the policies of trying to, they said the issue was that prices were too low. So we need to increase prices. By the way we do that is we produce more money. So they prolonged the depression, the devastation. They didn't allow the market to correct itself. They didn't allow prices to adjust, wages to adjust. So they try to solve the problem of being sober by taking more drugs. What a great idea. You had the 2008 financial crisis, Lebanon, in 2019, still occurring, I believe.
Yes.
United States, not as severe, but severe. 9% inflation. There was a recession in 2020, and then thankfully we had a virus that allowed us to print more money and justify avoiding this recession simultaneously. They just occurred. Thankfully, we got out of it. Anyways, this money, 40% of the existing money in the US economy was printed in 2020. And now it's being filtered throughout the economy. Prices are adjusting. So prices have gone up, not down. And we're still analyzing the effects of this. This is why government regulation is bullshit. They say it's for your health and your protection. It's not true. It's to actually create cartels and benefit themselves. This is Murray Rothbard wrote the book, The Progressive Era of the 20th Century, how so much regulation occurred due to the financial interest of the corporation owners of so many industries, railroads, oil, all this was justified in the name of regulation. in the name of, markets are too chaotic and we need protection. And this is what the government, they were able to step in and protect, insulate these corporations from competitors. If I can come in, if anyone can come in, then that's a threat in the sense of their to their business of profits and losses. But if they're regulated, they're insulated, then they can charge higher prices. People can't compete with them, so we don't have markets. With the healthcare industry, there's only like two or three per state. Apparently, it's super regulated. So what happens? Prices are way higher for insurance and medical services. This is not a market for people take this line of logic and they think, well, therefore markets are failing because we're trying to regulate them. They're still super expensive, so we need the government to pay for it. But it's the reverse. You need to remove all the regulations. You have market regulations, not government regulations. Market regulations in the competitive aspect will provide the best amount of service, the best quality services at the best prices. But once it's distorted, intervened, distorted, regulated, prices go up, quality goes down. Okay, so now with the remaining minutes, I want to discuss the modern implications. Where are we today? We have inflationary pressures. This is another book by Professor Guido Holzmann, great economist. He wrote the biography of Ludwig von Mises. He's a senior fellow at the Mises Institute, but he teaches in Angers in France. And I had an interaction with him at the Madrid Austrian Economic Research Conference. He had this book coming out, Abundance, Generosity in the State. And I told him, I'm researching the economics of suicide. And he said, oh, I hope my book can help you with your research. But he talks about generosity, inflation culture, deflation culture. In deflation culture, and we'll discuss more like deflation, what is it? Is it good or bad? But if prices are going down relatively, you have more wealth accumulation, you're more generous. In inflation culture, prices going up, you have less wealth, you're less generous, you give less. The state is killing your ability to be generous. If prices are higher at a restaurant, maybe I spend less on the tip. I would like to, pay more for the tips, but this is directly affecting my ability to give. Furthermore, he discusses this idea of inflation culture. The Zoomers, the younger generations, are living in a culture of higher time preference, of inflationary culture. These pressures, maybe you can't recognize it, but you can feel it. And I think to be aware of it through understanding what it is that is affecting people to feel certain ways, to act certain ways, to the extent that these pressures come from the economy and economics, I think will greatly help you. It's like if you have a disease, you can treat the symptoms, but it's probably ideal to understand what the cause is and how to cure the cause. This is my book, An Economic Analysis of Suicide. I wanted to plug myself. But my point is that inflation does lead to suicides. And Durkheim writes about this. The first work of sociology was called Les Suicide, I think, on suicide. Maybe it wasn't Les Suicide. 1897. And he talks about how during times of financial disruptions, he also said people who occur immediate overnight prosperity or lose prosperity, this radical economic financial change makes them kind of off balance, and this can lead to suicides. So suicidality is not something that's just feeling based or internally psychological based. There's societal external factors that contribute to why people commit suicide. And this is due to inflation and recessions. The Great Depression in the United States was not just that people lost jobs, people starved, people committed suicide. So yeah, we're discussing this. And then a student of Guido Holzman, Jeffrey Degner, just published his PhD thesis titled Inflation and the Family. And he points to, in 1950 in this country, the percentage of people at the age of 30 who are both married and homeowners was 50%. In, I think, 2020 or later, guess what that percentage is of people who are 30, a homeowner, and married? That's very close. It's 12%. The ability for the younger generation to purchase homes is is massively decreasing. So I think my point is that, and we mentioned this yesterday at lunch, where's the justice? Who can pay for this theft in wealth? And it's hard when you don't know. If you don't know why your wealth evaporated or your living standards have decreased, that leads some people to like existentially maybe take it out on themselves. But I'll tell you that the culprit is, well, I don't want to end yet, but it's the Federal Reserve. So I'll leave you with this quote from Joe Salerno. Fractional reserve banking is inherently inflationary and generates the business cycle. That is a cycle of inflation followed by recession. That is a conclusion of economics, not ethics. I really want to keep this descriptive, not normative. I'm not saying that this is, injustice and it's wrong or evil in a moral sense. I'm saying this is the logic of economics, is that if you have fractional reserve banking, it will lead to inflation. It will lead to this business cycle phenomenon. And with that, I end. We should end the. Thank you.
Good job.
Any questions or ideas for discussion? I don't know if we have in the chat. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. So my question is like all like this money that the government just like throwing into the market is bad, and we find, let's say, a way how to like correct that and stop doing that. How will be how will people like organize themselves? Because like the government is how we used to like organize the things that we need, like our services. But without that role of the government, like printing the money, they will have like no job. It's like there will be like no uh way for them like to possibly exist. So that means like a transition in a new way of organizing ourselves. What do you think would be like that way of organizing us?
Well, that's a good question. And this is the essence of what we're teaching. We're not just teaching you anarchism of end the government and that's it. We're teaching you what is the alternative form of society in absence of the state. We have market institutions. We have jobs that exist. This is the market order. So in the absence of government, there won't be chaos. There will still be jobs and employment and prosperity and wealth production. But we're saying that the case may be that without the government, we'll have more wealth, more prosperity, more peace, more social cohesion, more deepening of the division of labor and interdependence. The state, if it facilitates wars, if it's an institution of inflation, that provides no social benefit. So they may be doing some things, right? Like producing certain things, but what's the market alternative? We're comparing the market system versus the totalitarian system versus socialism. And I think in the future pillars, we'll go into specifically analyzing specific institutions of safety, of regulations, and all these things. But the market has demonstrated to provide, will continue to provide as long as it's allowed to prevail. So, yeah, don't fear that without the state, people won't be able to organize. No, there's order, there's peace.
Yeah.
But we'll come to that. But that's the fundamental question. So keep the question, and it will be answered in time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Like 2 minutes break. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Chat
Okay.
and read it out.
Would you consider Bitcoin as an alternative to the inherent fractional reserve banking's perceived flaws?
Oh.
Yes, but I would say Bitcoin is an alternative to the inherent fractional reserve banking flaws. Not the only alternative. Um, but and it's not even Bitcoin per se. You can have a fiat money, you can have a commodity money. So you can keep these monies. The real problem of fractional reserve banking is the central bank and the ability to and essentially allow fractional reserve banking to persist, to exist. So if you remove that, you don't necessarily need to change the money, although that would also be ideal. Um, that's why the message of Ron Paul is end the bank. Once you understand the nature of the Federal Reserve and you understand its effects on creating inflation and the distortions in the economy and society, the issue is this system of central banking and money manipulation. That's the way to manipulate money. But if money exists as it is and it's not inflationary, governments will have to resort to taxation, and people quickly will change their minds about all the things that are going on in society. So, yes. One more question. Okay. What other alternatives are we suggesting here? We're suggesting free banking. We're suggesting separation of deposit banking and loan banking. So we're suggesting ending the Federal Reserve, central banks. The central banks facilitate the cartelization of the banking system, and that's what removes and distorts people's savings from their own possession. People can't even go to the bank in times of crisis sometimes to receive their money. It's gone. So we're also suggesting alternative theories of money. And then, yeah, I think that is the foundational problems with the modern monetary system. And if we correct those, then all the other issues that we experience in society will also be mediated to some extent. So I hope that answers the question. But thank you, everyone. We'll take a break.
Okay.